I think the greatest hope of Kolbe's story is that he was facing this immovable force of totalitarianism that was so deeply demonic and evil, and at the same time completely powerful. And it was actually a very small act of love and of hope that it didn't require him to start a big political movement. It wasn't this magnificent project of his media conglomerate, that changed the world. It was actually just a small act of love, one man to another man, that ultimately was a very important chink in the armor of of the Nazis and led to its sort of unraveling, I think, in a very spiritually profound way. And I think that for all of us to sort of remember that it is our willingness to be like Christ that can save the world from this type of evil. Absolutely. That the loss of hope, the loss of faith, it is what will result in these evil forces taking control and sort of taking that place of cultural superiority. And we can stand against it in our day-to-day lives with the way that we live.
Yeah, it's very well said.
This is Let Me Be Frank, Bishop Caggiano's weekly platform to speak to featured guests and to speak directly to you. We're on 1350 AM and 103.9 FM in Connecticut, on Sirius XM, on YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts, including on the Veritas Catholic Network mobile app on your phone. And if you like what we're doing, please consider partnering with us and help us grow the show and bring Bishop Caggiano's voice to more people. To partner with us, go to veritascatholic.com and click on donate and be a part of Let Me Be Frank. One of our very important partners and sponsor of this show is Foundations in Faith. Foundations in Faith works hard year-round to transform pastoral care ministries in the Diocese of Bridgeport. To learn more about their outstanding work, go to foundationsinfaith.org. Okay, here we go. This is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. I'm Steve Lee, and it is my great pleasure, as always, to introduce Bishop Frank Caggiano.
Steve, good morning. Good morning.
Hey, Excellency.
Listen, the weather changed, that's for sure. Last night we had like a typhoon that came through.
Yeah, between the wind and the rain, but it feels better today.
Oh, and today was 60 degrees when I got in my car. Yesterday was 89. What a strange world we live in. Anyway, good to be with you, and we have a great guest.
Yes, we're going to talk about, I wanted to show you, I don't know if you've ever noticed or the listeners have noticed, but over my shoulder here, there's a reliquary, and this is a relic of St. Maximilian Kolbe. It's a first-class relic because I have a deep devotion to him, and we kind of dedicated this mission of Veritas Catholic Network to him when we began because of his sanctity and courage, and also his media efforts. And then we have here a one-of-a-kind icon of Maximilian Kolbe. And so he has behind him on one side is the prison tower, and on the other side of him is a radio tower.
Oh, wow.
So so just kind of to set that up, because I'm really excited about this conversation, Excellency.
And I want you to be part of it, my friend.
Okay. All right. So I am pleased to introduce, I'm going to make the introduction short because I want him to be able to tell his story because it's so cool. But I'm very happy to introduce Anthony D'Ambrosio. And Anthony is the writer and director of a new movie coming out called Triumph of the Heart. This is about St. Maximilian Kolbe. It was filmed on location at Auschwitz. And Anthony's life changed from the story of Maximilian Kolbe. Before you say hello to him, I want to let our listeners know that there is going to be a special pre-release screening of the movie on Thursday, August 14th at 7 o'clock at the AMC Royale in Norwalk. So you can get tickets. We're going to put the link to the getting tickets in the show notes. But August 14th at 7 p.m. in Norwalk, you can catch a pre-release screening of this movie.
Tremendous. I'm delighted. Yes. I'm absolutely delighted that we have that.
Anthony D'Ambrosio, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Anthony, welcome. Welcome. So listen, you have had quite an interesting journey of life and faith.
That's right.
So if you don't mind, Tell us what you're comfortable sharing with myself and who will listen to us. How did you
Oh,
get to this
absolutely.
point in your life?
Well, it's a winding path, and I will do my best to keep it brief, and then you can drill into any
Mhm.
interesting details that you would like to get into. But essentially, the main beats of the story. I grew up a like Catholic homeschooled kid. My dad is a well-known theologian. Goes by the moniker Doctor Italy, but Dr. Marcellino D'Ambrosio, author, speaker, does pilgrimages. And taught at the University of Dallas. And so my family moved down there as a homeschooled kid, very intellectually astute, very well read, very well formed. I went to seminary, and when I was in seminary after high school, I really fell in love with evangelization and the mission of the laity to be the leaven of the world. And I left seminary with this like great missionary instinct to build a family, to convert the world through new media, through youth ministry. I was a speaker, as a musician, and I went out and began to build one of the biggest youth ministries in the U.S. In Frisco, Texas. But while I was doing that, I fell deeply in love, and then just on the edge of engagement, became very ill, and nobody could figure out what was going on. One of the most infuriating and difficult of the symptoms that I was experiencing was chronic insomnia, and chronic insomnia such that it was like totally debilitating. 20 minutes to 2 hours a night type thing over and over and over and over and over again. And in the midst of that, I knew that I couldn't move forward into marriage with this person that I love very dearly. And so I had to end the relationship after a while of this, and in a search of a solution, hoping that perhaps I could get back to it. But it took years and years and years to begin to diagnose it and get to the bottom of what it was. And in the midst of that, the relationship had to really truly die. She got married to somebody else, and I, in the grief and the anger and sort of just the insanity of sleep deprivation, I really lost my faith. And that wasn't something that I chose. It was something that in many ways just happened to me. I could not believe in God. I could not believe in God's goodness. And frankly, I became one of those atheists that just really wanted to tear down the faith of everyone around me, because I found it to be so infuriating. And I, in the, I guess during that time, I found myself doing writing projects as a way to make, yeah, just to survive. That was the profession that I could do while I was in such a state. And so one of the projects that I was working on was a Catholic entrepreneur that had dedicated his I guess his practice to St. Maximilian Kolbe. And I was writing a biography for Maximilian Kolbe for the website, found the page, Maximilian Kolbe's page on Wikipedia, and just was shocked by some details in it that I'd never heard before. Many people already know that he traded his life for another man and saved another man's life, and starved to death in a starvation bunker for him. I think that some of the details of the story that began to magnetize it for me were that not only did he stay alive for 14 days, but over time, those who were in the cell began to sing these songs with him, began to pray with him. They were often found holding each other in the middle of the cell, singing these hymns. And from my perspective, in the state that I was in of grief and suffering, and perhaps the experience of insomnia gave me a reference point for starvation, because I was starving so much for sleep. I I realized how miraculous that was. That there was no way that I could imagine St. Maximilian Kolbe getting me to sing in the midst of something that dark and traumatic and evil. And I think it was one of those things that most people just sort of take for granted, that he was able to do that. Of course, that's what they would do. But truly, from the perspective of the human heart and the human journey, I guess that is a miracle to be able to instill that sort of hope and heroism. And ultimately, he was not only was he executed 14 days later with no food or water, because these songs, of course, were being so annoying to the German, I guess, effort. But there were four other men that were also executed with him. And that means that he brought these four other men to a point of sanctity with him, that he basically like took them by the hand and brought him all the way to the doorway of heaven. And I believe even into heaven with him. And so that perspective, those details shocked me. They made me realize that Kolbe had something to teach me about hope, about suffering, about how to endure, even though I was in many ways incredibly resistant to opening my heart to that. It just haunted me, as saints often do. And I guess here I am 6 years later with a movie about him being produced and my faith restored and a healed heart. And in many ways, I have all of that. I owe all of that to this sort of ongoing meditation that has produced this film.
What a remarkable story, and a remarkable testimony to the power of the saints and their intercession. In this case, Maximilian Kolbe, for yourself. You have written and directed the film. Both.
That's right. That's right. I wrote the film really in these bouts of insomnia when I couldn't do anything else in the middle of the night and there's no one to talk to. I used the script writing process to talk to Maximilian Kolbe, and in many ways it felt like I was being invited into the cell, and in many ways it also felt like Kolbe was being invited into my sort of the cell of my insomnia and the cell of my suffering, and we were meeting there, and the dialogue that was taking place was ultimately the foundation of the script that became the movie.
Right. You know, the story, I of course, many of us know about Maximilian Kolbe singing in his cell because it mimics the ancient martyrs of the church, right, who sang on their way to crucifixion. I did not know what you just shared, which I thought was fascinating, that he also brought others to sing with him. And correct me now, because I may be wrong here, but most of his cellmates would have been Jewish.
It was so at the time, and this is one of those little known facts about Auschwitz's history, that the Polish people are very that they really want told, which is that before Auschwitz became the main instrument of the Holocaust, it started as a internment camp to exterminate Polish resistance and Polish identity. And so there were Jewish people in Auschwitz, for sure, but it was at the time specifically for people who were of influence, who had some kind of leadership role in Poland. And of course, there were Jewish people, but there were simply POWs. There were people who were involved in the army. There were people involved in media and politics and culture. Those who were wealthy and were deemed to be perhaps a thorn in the flesh for the Nazi government. These were the people that were mainly present in Auschwitz at the time. There were also people, homosexuals, that were shipped off from Berlin to be there. And so there was this confluence of different personalities from far-reaching opposite aisles. You know, if you were to just sort of take a cross-section of Washington, D.C., and take the average of all of those people and then put them in Auschwitz, that's kind of a good example of what that might have looked like, or Los Angeles or something like that.
Right.
Like
Or New York, for that matter.
Right. Yeah. These places that are sort of the cultural hubs of the city. That's what you would have expected. And so, of course, it's a story about ecumenism, and that there was people not in his like from his religious faith tradition, and that's depicted in the movie. But there are also people who are perhaps from his faith tradition, but from across the political spectrum as well. So there's a lot of really interesting dynamics, and we we really played those out to the nth degree in the film.
That's tremendous, tremendous. I do know that some of the influencers, a group of influencers the Nazis certainly wanted to exterminate, is the clergy itself, is the Catholic
Right.
Church's clergy, because of the great fidelity of the peoples, particularly in the Eastern Europe, right, to Christ through their clergy.
Especially in Poland, yeah.
Yeah, especially in Poland. But it's fascinating, though. So we don't know the religious background of the men who sang with him. And so it could have crossed faith lines, if I could put it that way, which then, if I could speculate that, then it shows the power of hope and how hope can bridge the gap between people. It's an answer to one of the deepest longings of our hearts, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the experience of suffering is universal. It's one of the most universal things about the human experience. Every human has to face their own death and ultimately the deaths of those that are close to them at some point in their life. You know, some people experience great griefs and loss earlier on in their lives. Some people experience it later on in their lives. But either way, it's an inevitability. And I think that the beautiful thing about Maximilian Kolbe's story is that it's able to speak to that universal experience and give an answer to it in a way that our current culture does not. You know, there's lots of things to say about like the culture wars themselves, but all of that I think is a symptom of an underlying lack of hope. If if this world is all that we have, it create, and that's what people believe, then it creates all of these incredibly uh, difficult scenarios in which you have to sort of backbend around suffering, that suffering can't be accepted because it really does make this life feel meaningless if
Mm-hmm.
there is nothing beyond this life and
Mm-hmm.
beyond the suffering to sort of stretch for and reach
Mm-hmm.
for when you're in the midst of that darkness. And
Mm-hmm.
so Colby's story and his songs and his witness of hope in the midst of the darkest and most terrifying experience of death and oppression that perhaps humans could exact upon each other since the crucifixion. I think it is an absolute miracle and an absolute, I guess, clarion call of hope for the world.
Yeah, I mean, that was very well said. It's funny. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the person with whom he exchanged his place,
Hmm.
when that man was chosen to die, really pleaded, right, because he was a father, he was the head of his family, and it raises another point that I think you just made, which I'd like to highlight, and that is, it's one thing to accept suffering in one's own life. It's one thing to see the suffering in the lives of the people you love, too. Sometimes to see the suffering in those you love is actually harder than accepting it for oneself,
That is very true.
right?
I
And
think especially for mothers, this is
yeah,
Our Lady's greatest suffering is the suffering of her son and
right,
ultimately then her children.
right.
I think it's an interesting one of the things that I loved when I first visited Poland and began to really imbibe the
Mm-hmm.
experience of Catholicism. When you look at their art tradition, it's all grim. It's all like, you know, I guess saturated with a suffering hope, if you will, a
Mm-hmm.
grit and a face towards suffering. And I think that goes all the way back to their depiction of Our Lady of Czestochowa, which is their icon, maybe like the Polish Our Lady of Guadalupe. It's like both a national symbol and a symbol of Catholicism. And this is a icon of Our Lady with her child that has been literally through wars and through persecution. It's been attacked and slashed with swords, tried to be destroyed, shot with arrows, smoked in fire, and the Poles, being who they are, saw it as a I guess symbol of their own national identity and their own suffering, their own experience of suffering, and so it's an image of Our Lady scarred with us, with
Right.
us in our suffering. And we
Right.
thought, oh, we have to present that version of Our Lady in the movie.
Right.
And it's been interesting because Americans don't really know what to do with it. Like, I think that we're so, our imagination has been so culturally moved by the evangelical and I guess aesthetic, and in that way, we're not used to seeing images that are darker. I think we've almost become used to the fact that the thing that makes us special in our art is the crucifix. Like, we have Christ crucified, erected above all of our churches, and the same sort of idea with Mary is present in the movie, and it's like shocking to people. Like,
Yeah.
why does
I
Mary
can
have
imagine.
scars?
Sure. Absolutely.
Why is her skin so dark? Like, it's really a shocking aesthetic or version or
Right.
presentation of Our Lady.
Not to critique our American culture too much, because of which I am part of, but
Right.
right. But if there's a culture that has created a mythology around it, that we are like, we've made it. We're the city on the hill, to quote Ronald Reagan. We are the ones where hope can be easily realized
Right.
economically,
Hmm.
socially, in mobility.
Right.
Therefore, we are the ones who can be most aptly tempted to forget the hope that you're talking about
Right.
and have it a crisis when it comes. Right. And we have not fought, except for 9/11 and Pearl Harbor, um, in recent history, at least in the last 100 years, we have not fought, thanks be to God, any battle on our territory.
Mhm.
But look at Poland, even to this day, with the invasion to the Ukraine. All the speculation is if the Russians were crazy enough to launch a war, the first place they would go is Poland. And so to
Yes.
live like that all the time
Right.
is, like you said, it creates a viewpoint where suffering can't be escaped. It's got to
Yeah.
be dealt with, right? Let me ask you this. I'm very curious. I've only been to Auschwitz once because of World Youth Day. And, at that time there was like, I don't forget how many young people were there. I mean, it's just like an enormous amount of young people. And, so our little group was very little. We had 260 young people from the diocese. We went to Auschwitz, and I told this story before, but it's worth telling again. And when we got off the buses and we entered, as soon as we parked, and I remember there was like a decent walk to go to the entrance, right? I don't know, Steve, were you part of that group? I don't remember. No.
No, I wasn't there.
Yeah. And the young people, just, how you have to corral them and tell them be quiet. There was dead silence in the group. Now, you imagine 260 young people on a pilgrimage, all pumped up, not sleeping, the whole thing, eating too much sugar, blah, blah, blah. Dead silence until one young man said, let's pray, and began the rosary himself. And within 100 feet, the entire group was praying it together. I will never forget that. I will never, ever forget that. It is a place that is somber, is solemn, it's sacred, it's horrifying in so many ways. But we were not allowed to go into the cell of Maximilian Kolbe because I guess the authorities felt that so many people going through it would just be destroyed, like wrecked, right? So it's still on my bucket list because I would like to be able to go into that cell where he was. So my question to you is, how difficult was it to get permission to actually use the site for the film?
Yeah. So there's we did not use the actual cell for the film for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
We shot uh, very, very close
Yeah.
to Auschwitz, but not specifically inside of the camp for multiple reasons. A film, a film, as if anybody has been on a film set, it's actually a very disruptive
Yeah.
environment.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
incredibly difficult to create a sense of the sacred when people are in incredibly stressful environment, trying to move costumes around, and all of the logistics of a film set are. It's very similar to a wedding. Like,
Yeah.
you've got a million guests that are all kind of being ushered in and out, and all these logistics and vendors and even animals, that were like carting in and out, like the snake, and we've got like rats that we're sort of using.
Oh,
So
I'm not
it's a
coming.
little bit
I
of a
would not show
circus,
up. Sorry, I'm out.
So anyway, all that to say, we filmed in an apartment complex that was a barracks and textile factory that was converted into an apartment complex later on, and just got permission from the city and from all the neighbors to sort of move out all the cars and to sort of take it over for a few days. And then in a prison that was really close, that was actually condemned and about to be renovated, that allowed us to shoot inside of it. But we did have to change a few things in order to make it work for a movie.
Hmm.
The actual cell that Colby was in was much smaller than what we shot in, and even our movie feels claustrophobic. But you have to have space to move the camera around and to have the people in order to sort of like let light bounce off the walls and things. So we had to find a space that was like a little bit bigger,
Right.
and we had to paint it lighter in order for it to not suck up all the light.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was a very, very dark place. I mean, it was, I think, 10 by 10, and all of the walls were painted black, so there was no light, very little light in there as well.
Wow. Wow. Well, when we come back from the break, I'm just curious about your training as a director, right?
Mm.
And then I think for our listeners who may not be much familiar with Maximilian Kolbe, if you give us like a rundown of his life, right, so that
Absolutely.
people who can get to know him more intimately as you have come to know him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fascinating. Fantastic that you're doing this. Okay, so this is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. His Excellency is speaking with Anthony D'Ambrosio, the writer and director of a new movie about Maximilian Kolbe that's coming out imminently, and it's called Triumph of the Heart. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Carolyn Killian, the Director of Bereavement for the Diocese of Bridgeport Catholic Cemeteries. I'm excited to let you know about one of our very successful bereavement programs. 2 years ago, we realized there was a real need to provide support and comfort on a daily basis to those who are living with the loss of a loved one. We now publish a faith-based grief reflection that we call The Healing Journey. Each day we provide a reflection, a poem, a prayer, a song, or a story of real people living with grief, some who are hoping to become closer to God, and others who are struggling to find Him. We send this via email every morning at 7:30 and are encouraged that thousands of people read it. I invite you to sign up for this free reflection at thegrief.org. That's THEGRIEF.org.
Okay, welcome back to Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. We're speaking with Anthony D'Ambrosio, the writer and director of Triumph of the Heart. Fantastic new movie that's coming out.
So, Anthony, so you directed the film. Now, I may ask it's an impertinent question, but I always see directing a film as an art form, obviously, like singing an opera or painting. You don't completely learn it. Some of it is innate because you're creating a picture that conveys a meaning that keeps moving, right? So do you have training in that, or is this just a natural ability on your part, or both, or?
Yeah, I found when I started directing, and I started with commercials, with social media pieces, frankly, with doing things for youth ministry, testimonials, doing media for Catholic apostolates, and then ultimately doing commercials for secular businesses. But most of what I was doing when I was younger was just getting these reps in, if you will, on very low budget things, and I didn't realize that I was so talented for it at first, because I knew that I was a good writer, and I wrote all of the commercials that I was presenting and pitching. But then as we started delivering some of these, I started to realize that I was taking issue with how other directors were directing these commercials that I was making. I would hire other people who were very experienced and bring them in, and then I would go back and kind of go into the edit and then redo everything that they did. And so after doing that many times, I started to just direct myself, and then immediately just found that all of the talents and all of the work that I had done to that point had wax on, wax off, Karate Kid style, really trained me for this. Because when you're doing youth ministry, you are creating a sacred environment for people to become vulnerable, to have a genuine encounter, a genuine experience. And when you're trying to make sacred art, but trying to do so in the context of a film, even if it's a commercial, all of that is necessary in order to convey the experience. The job of the director, one, is to have taste, which is obviously something that can't be taught. That has to be imbibed. And because I grew up with just drinking from a fire hydrant of the Catholic tradition, my taste was elevated. And then secondarily, it's about being able to bring a group of people around a shared common experience of something transcendent, which is both like event planning and also like creating a retreat. And those all sort of came together in this little pool of I guess experiences that just had already formed me and shaped me to be rather excellent at what I was doing. And frankly, I think the fact that I was fortunate enough to be working inside of the context of the church meant that very few people as directors get to be funded to do short films. But I was pitching these Catholic nonprofits and organizations on doing these small 4-minute type short film promotionals in order to help them articulate perhaps a theme or to share a vision for what they did for raising money. And all of that led me to being able to do about, I think, 15 to 20 short films before I had got to the point of actually making a movie. And all of those were, small budgets, which meant that I had to build a team over time of people who were very talented, who could work without much funding and who had this sort of spiritual, desire, this itch to tell these sorts of stories. And so that put me just not in terms of a position of craftsmanship myself to be able to do it, but I had a team of people already that I could rely on to build this together.
Yeah, that's remarkable. See, we talk often, Steve and I, about the renewal of our diocese. Renewal of the church is based on the transcendentals. A film well done of sacred substance really includes truth, beauty, and goodness. It engages the mind, the heart, and the will. So it is a privileged way to evangelize if it's done very well, right?
I believe so. It is the modern cultural liturgy still. It is the place where people are experiencing meaning or shaping their values. And this has been the truth ever since the dawn of civilization, that storytelling is how we encode the DNA of our values and pass them down to the next generation. And the fact that we've sort of lost our place as the cultural storyteller, as the person who's sitting in the campfire kind of describing and encoding the values into story and transmitting to the next generation, means that we're not passing down our faith. That's just frankly what it means. And the reality is also that we used to be excellent at this. It was the case that all of the new media of the medieval era was developed for cathedrals, was developed for the experience of passing on the faith down to the next generation. The greatest of Mozart's works, the greatest of Bach's works, all of these things were written for the liturgy, written for the experience of transcendent faith. And now I think that we've struggled to transition into filmmaking for a lot of different reasons. But I think that that is about to change, and our movie, I think, gets to be sort of the spearhead, the tip of the spear for a new renaissance of storytelling in the Catholic perspective.
Tremendous. I hope so. I pray that's the case. Absolutely. Just another question, if you why the title Triumph of the Heart? Why did you choose that as the title?
It was a genius idea that actually was not mine, given to me after someone criticized the very bad idea that I had for the title.
What was that one?
It was so we did a short film that was called Into Death and Beyond It, and that was kind of the working title that I had when I started the script. And I was meeting at something called the Napa Institute, which is a Catholic kind of gathering of leaders, and I met a guy named Jeff Olson, who is the showrunner of Seventh Heaven, one of these first kind of faith-based shows that became mainstream. He was also, which was a funny fact, he was also one of the, I guess, storytellers of the WWE for I think 10 years.
Really?
So he had an amazing ability to think about showmanship and how people would receive media. And he immediately was like, this is a movie about Auschwitz, and you already got an obstacle with getting people to watch it. They're going to feel compelled to and maybe guilty for not watching it, but they're going to have this sense of oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? So you need a title that gives them a sense of the hope, to promise them this is going to be worth it in the end. You're not going to be left just destroyed for a week and a half afterwards. So he was like, the being a master of propaganda himself, he was well versed in the history of it, and was like, the Nazis had their most famous piece of propaganda was The Triumph of the Will. Was this documentary that they put together about I think it was the Olympics, and also a very huge I guess parade that they threw in Germany, in Berlin. And I think that the idea of Kolbe really being the foil to the entire Nazi project was really core to the movie. And he saw that, and he was like, if you played on that title and named it Triumph of the Heart, it really articulates what Kolbe was doing with his story. I was like, oh, that is genius. I'm immediately changing the name on all my scripts and not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to tell them that I came up with this genius idea.
Well, now you told a couple of million people that you did. That's all right, though. We'll keep it amongst ourselves.
Yeah, we won't tell anybody.
No, we won't tell. So now listen.
Yeah, it's just a secret.
Yeah, it's a secret. So there may be some who are listening who have heard the name, heard a bit about even what you have shared, but really don't know the background in life of Maximilian Kolbe. So to a person doesn't know much, how would you outline his life? What would you want that person to know about Maximilian Kolbe?
Yeah, I would say that Kolbe was in many ways a very common a common Polish boy, the son of textile workers in a small, poor town in Poland. And he was incredibly Catholic and incredibly patriotic, and that was not an uncommon thing for Poland at the time. Poland was also under attack. It was being oppressed by Russia. And this is sort of the story of Poland. It's sandwiched between perhaps the two most warlike and aggressive nations in the world, Russia and Germany. And so they're just sort of the prize that the two of those countries war over and have been conquered over and over and over and over again. So he grew up with this incredibly profound sense of pride in both his Catholicism and his national identity. But he was also, I think, really aware of kind of a militancy that was necessary in order to preserve and maintain that. And so he wanted to enter the army, but he entered the seminary and considered leaving in order to join the military. And then ultimately, because of his mother's sort of intercession, he decided to stay. His brother left and went to war against the Russians and ultimately went missing. His father went looking for him, never came back. And was hung by the Russians. And so he had this sense of his faith was completely wrapped up in the language of the military, and he saw the sort of encroachment of propaganda and the use of new media as being the most powerful tools that communists, Freemasons, and fascists were using to erode the identity of his people. And so, as a friar, as one in poverty, he decided that he was going to make the first big Catholic media newspaper. And this is before Mother Angelica. This is before any other sort of saint considered using new media for the sake of evangelization. He really was kind of the pioneer of this. And at the time, this was something that governments had to spend money on. The printing presses of that 20th century were incredibly expensive. They required a expertise in engineering, and they were actually very physically difficult to use. They required hand cranking things that would take a great exertion. And so it was completely unimaginable for all of these, I guess, his superiors at the time to greenlight this sort of ambitious project. Mm-hmm. But Kolbe, even as a young person, was completely you couldn't tell him no as a stubborn Pole. And he went ahead and started this media empire, which grew into a media empire. He had, I think, a syndication of over 1 million Catholics that he was delivering magazines to, not just weekly but daily. And if you think about like the logistical feat of that, it's really incredible. But he started also the largest friary in the world at the time in order to maintain this, I guess, this radio station, newspaper, media conglomerate that he was growing. And so ultimately, he's not really remembered for all of this, though, even though he was the sort of one of the proto-entrepreneur saints of his time. Really what he was remembered for is that after the Nazis invaded, he was taking care of Jews. He was doing many things that were very clearly showing and signaling that he was not friendly to the Nazi, I guess, agenda. And so he was taken into Auschwitz and dehumanized. They were trying to exterminate not just him, but kind of all of the spirit of all of these Poles, and in doing so, trying to break the will of Poland. But he would not break, and his act of courage to sort of step forward and to be human and to love and to sacrifice for others in that place was kind of like this brilliant light that reminded Poland of its identity in a moment that it really needed to find its soul. And it's remembered and has become kind of a part of the DNA of the culture. And so, yeah, we revere him as Catholics, but the Poles also hold him very highly as a Polish hero.
Anthony, how old was he when he died? Do you know?
He was in his 40s. I can't remember exactly
he was a young man.
Me showing my
He's a young man. Is my point, right? The age is not exact, but we're not talking an older man. We're talking a young man, and he accomplished all of this, let's say, by his mid-40s.
Yes,
which adds more to the remarkable nature of what he did.
Yeah, and he did all of that with one lung. He was also someone who struggled with chronic illness. He had tuberculosis that was not cured throughout the course of his life. And he went to Nagasaki and started a newspaper out there. If you think about the difficulty of translating Polish to Japanese, I can't imagine how he found the translator that could help him do that. But he decided that the hardest place in the world for the Catholic faith to get its roots was going to be the place that he went to begin the next stage of his evangelization outreach. So the man was indomitable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Steve, when Veritas was founded, you decided Maximilian would be the patron?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. In speaking with Monsignor Royal about things as he was advising me through the beginning, he said, you should really dedicate yourself and the apostolate Maximilian Kolbe. And so I read more about him and I started praying to him, and I was able to get this relic, and then we got the icon. And, one of the things that I also, Anthony, as a patron to you, as I'm sure you know, he began starting a movie studio also before and he wasn't able to get it up and running before he got arrested. But this is in the 1930s. So he was way ahead of his time doing that. And he was so well known that when he and his friars were marched into Auschwitz for the first time, and they're going in, like a lot of the prisoners were like, "Oh, that's Maximilian Kolbe. Look, Maximilian Kolbe is here." And Kolbe turned to his brother priests and he said, "Take courage and pray well." And he's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the interesting thing about this is that it's not just Kolbe who would have been well known in Auschwitz at the time, right? Like, I think a lot of times when you kind of think about the elite cultural leaders in a culture, the higher up you kind of go in influence, the smaller the circle becomes, and the more of those people know each other. Even if they're rivals, they would sort of know who each other are. And that was one of those fascinating things about just thinking about what it would have been like in Auschwitz at the time if all of those sort of elite of the culture, like the person who owns Fox News being with Bishop Barron, being with like, a CNN anchor, like that would be kind of what it would be like in reference point to their own politics. Of course, like now they have this common enemy that's oppressing them. But the goal of Auschwitz wasn't just to exterminate, it was to completely rob these people of their humanity, to in some way prove that they were subhuman compared to the Nazis. And Kolbe's sacrifice and his ability to love in the midst of that and hope in the midst of that was the thing that called Auschwitz sort of back from that brink and saved thousands of lives as they realized who they were and kind of had their humanity returned to them through Kolbe's sacrifice.
Right. I must confess, this whole conversation raises just an observation in my own mind. We look back on what happened and we ask ourselves, how was this possible? How is it possible for evil to take on such a dimension, such ferocity, such acceptance, even if it's passive acceptance by so many people? And it's a question, obviously, that doesn't have an answer. But it does raise the specter that what happened once can happen again. That we as a society have to be on guard of that which we allow and that which we tolerate, because I'm presuming, unbeknownst to the ordinary German, he or she woke up one day and realized the world had changed for the far worse. And some of what Maximilian can teach us is that for a believer, it's a time for courage regardless, whatever the situation is. But we have an obligation to evangelize to make sure the situation does not get repeated in any way, shape, or form in any form of organized evil.
Right.
Right? And hopefully your film will call people to mission, to action about that.
Yeah. I think the greatest hope of Kolbe's story is that he was facing this immovable force of totalitarianism that was so deeply demonic and evil, and at the same time completely powerful, suffocatingly powerful. And it was actually a very small act of love and of hope that any person could do. Of course, it's almost unimaginable to think about how hard it would be to sacrifice oneself for another in the midst of that. But the point is that it didn't require him to start a big political movement. It wasn't this magnificent project of his media conglomerate, that changed the world. It was actually just a small act of love, one man to another man, that ultimately was a very important chink in the armor of of the Nazis, and led to its sort of unraveling. I think in a very spiritually profound way, and I think that for all of us to sort of remember that it is our willingness to be like Christ that can save the world from this type of evil.
Absolutely.
That the loss of hope, the loss of faith, it is what will result in these evil forces taking control and sort of taking that place of cultural superiority. And we can stand against it in our day-to-day lives with the way that we live.
Yeah, that's very well said. If I might just add one other observation, and that is, in the time of the Nazis, the fascists, and all the rest, but particularly in the Holocaust, the evil was so profound it was obvious, right? You couldn't escape it. But evil takes other forms, right? Much more subtle, but equally pervasive in society. And so therefore, modern media, as a two-edged sword, gives it an opportunity to create a web that is easily missed, but at the same time gives us the means to confront it and to evangelize, as you're doing, in a whole new way. So once again, we're Christians since the beginning of our church, because since the incarnation, we always go into the realm, into the secular world, into the larger culture, mindful that we are there to evangelize, and we're also there to expose what's evil and call it for what it is, and evangelize an alternative, right? Whatever form it takes. So now just tell us, so this film is previewing?
Yeah, right now in the summer, you might be able to find a secret pre-screening somewhere in your city. But it's coming out officially in September 12th, the Feast of the Holy Name of Mary. We're releasing this film as an honor to her, I think, as Kolbe would have wanted.
Absolutely. So when we come back from the break, you could give our listeners the whole rundown.
Yeah. Yeah. And for listeners who don't want to wait until September 12th, August 14th, there's this pre-screening in Norwalk here in our diocese. So details and you can get tickets through a link in the show notes. But in the meantime, we're going to take a break and come back with a listener question, and we'll be right back.
Hey, it's Matt from Restless on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. Each week on Restless, we young adults restlessly seek the face of Christ in today's crazy and mixed up world. Join us each Friday at noon on 1350 AM, 103.9 FM, the Veritas app, or wherever you get your shows. Hope to see you there.
Okay, welcome back to Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. All right, Excellency, here is this week's listener question. It says, Bishop Caggiano, John Henry Newman was just given the title Doctor of the Church. What does that mean?
Well, there are about, if my math is correct, about 36 doctors in the church from its history, from its beginning. And these are men and women, both clergy, religious, and lay people who have been extraordinary contributors to the spiritual and theological patrimony of the church. Their teachings are basically seminal. Their teachings are foundational in the different ages in which they lived. And if there ever was a person who deserved to be named the doctor of the church, it was John Henry Newman, and the extraordinary journey of faith he lived. And he's seen ecumenically, because even in the Episcopal, the Anglican Church, he is venerated, even though he left the Anglican Church as a priest to become a Catholic. So, I'm delighted. When I heard the news, I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled. Right.
You know what's cool is I saw that Leo the 13th named him a cardinal, and now Leo the 14th is naming him a doctor.
Right. And Francis canonized him.
There you go. Wow.
Yeah, tremendous. So
basically, a doctor of the church is somebody who is really smart and really holy.
Yes, and wrote a lot of what he knew or she knew down, and now is a guidepost for us in the life of the church.
Great. So if you have a question for Bishop Frank, you can send it in on social media, or you can email questions@veritascatholic.com. You can find Bishop Frank Caggiano and also Veritas Catholic Network on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Let Me Be Frank is brought to you by a grant from the St. Therese Fund for Evangelization, which comes to us from Foundations in Faith. Foundations in Faith is committed to supporting and transforming pastoral ministries in the Diocese of Bridgeport. And to learn more about their work, go to foundationsinfaith.org. And if you're listening, make sure on Thursday, August 14th, you go to the AMC Royale Theater in Norwalk to catch a special pre-screening of Triumph of the Heart. This is the amazing movie that we've been talking about with Anthony D'Ambrosio. Thank you for joining us, Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me again. Steve, have you seen the movie yet?
I've seen clips of it, and
Okay.
it looks so good.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm looking forward to it. I have not seen any of it, so I'm dying to see it. Well, not literally dying, but I want to.
But we'll have a link to tickets to the pre-screening in the show notes, and also the website is triumphoftheheart.com.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Anthony, congratulations. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Well
I
done.
really
And thank you
appreciate
for
it.
joining the podcast. The more people who can see this film, the more they will be blessed.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Excellency, before we go, would you please give us your blessing?
absolutely. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, through the intercession of St. Maximilian Kolbe, renew our hearts with an ardent love and charity, with a great desire to evangelize the people around us, and to remain faithful to you, to your love and your holy will. Bless Anthony in this great endeavor. Continue to grant him the grace and inspiration to be himself an evangelizer in the world. And we ask that you bless us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank
Amen.
you.
Amen.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. So
Yep.
good to see you guys. Thank you
Yes.
so much for having me on.
No,
I hope to
my-
meet you.
Yeah. And say hello to the Benedictines. Tell them thank God they have the internet. That's all I have to say.